Hey there. So today I want to talk about something that Mark Waid did, because yes, Mark Waid cannot stay off social media. He cannot stay out of the interactions. He cannot control himself. Mark Waid is detestable out there. The way that he interacts with people, it brings out the worst in them. Now this transpires on the Marvel Masterworks board. This is a place where Mark Waid has been since 2016, and including the event we're going to look at, he had 17 posts. Now the person that is talking to him within this, you can see Jesse Baker. Jesse Baker has been banned, but he had 1,211 posts. You can see how much activity that he threw out there. But of course, Mark Waid didn't like what he said, and Mark Waid ended up getting him banned. Isn't that lovely? Back in the day, that was the way that these people controlled narrative. They would go and they would get you banned for the slightest thing. You in fact had a story with Dan Slott. I would encourage people to go and check this out with Doug Ernst. I did a video on it, but Doug Ernst covers it much better than I ever would, where Dan Slott decided he would teach a forum goer a lesson. He would teach them winning humility by pretending that their account was basically an egg account that Dan Slott controlled. He destroyed his name out there. The guy got threats and on because someone out there wanted to teach him what it was like. That's the kind of people that you dealt with. Those people and their narcissism, well, people would fall all over themselves to basically placate that. Because you get Mark Waid in a forum, well, heck, it's the real Mark Waid. People were willing to omit the way that these people truly acted and interacted. That's why I like current social media. That's why I say all the time that type of social media is the thing that killed that dinosaur. It's that meteorite that came in and struck down the image of what comic artist was. You had this cultivated image in the past where people could go in, they could clean it all up, and it was like nothing ever happened. They were the greatest people in the world. But now when you have instantaneous connection, you can see them preaching this gospel of the low. They like to strike low people, and they do it all the time. They come off and they tell you, if you're not just like us, or if you don't adopt a certain narrative, well, you're not only wrong, but as a comic consumer, you don't matter. You don't get to have a say. If you don't say things exactly how they want, if you don't toe the line exactly how they like, well, of course, you're not welcome at the party. Isn't that a lovely thing? Now, I think that's why Mark Waid quit Twitter. I know people talk about his rage quitting, but really, he couldn't control a narrative. See, on Facebook, you can actually remove comments to you. You can take them off of whatever you post. On Twitter, you can't do that. So Mark Waid could not cultivate the persona that he wanted. But on Facebook, he would do that, and he did. Oh, he definitely did. I would encourage people, in fact, to go and look at all the things that transpired within all that blowback from Antarctic Press. Because if you look at it, you'll notice one key factor emerges. All of the shots that you see, they don't match up. Why don't they match up? Well, because Mark Waid, Susan Auger, and one other person, I can't remember who they were out there always cultivating this facade that made it look like there was no blowback. People that would say things like, hey, this is going to cause Antarctic Press problems. You're going to get someone hurt. Poof, that had to go away. Because legit criticism, people that were angry, anyone that disagreed with Mark, well, of course, as Mark Waid said, the strong manipulate the weak. They protect the weak. My bad. I got that wrong. My bad there. But anyhow, this again, Marvel Masterwork Forum here, and you can see how this goes. So you see Jesse Baker talking about something here, and Mark Waid, again, you have to remember that he has 17 posts, including what we're seeing. So yeah, he's a real active forum person here. This is also why I'm super pissed that they gave the Marvel Masterworks Miss Marvel Volume 2 Intro to the Worthless Self-Absorbed Hack Kelly Sue DeConnick. Gee, I wonder why so few pros actually want to visit these boards. Right there, that language, it wants to get you removed. And this is Mark Waid. You can tell by the language. This would be a perfect impersonator familiar, if not, because the mannerisms and everything, this is definitely Mark Waid. Related fun fact, that's something that Mark Waid loves to throw in. Just because you write a story or an intro for Marvel doesn't automatically mean you don't have guidelines or editing to deal with. I don't know if that's the case with a specific introduction, but it's the kind of rage-filled comment I see here with disappointing frequency. Yeah, because, people, they really feel good about someone telling you, if you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. You can't buy stuff. I'm going to put in whatever I want. I'm going to manipulate that. And not only that, people can go out and they can say whatever they want on that pulpit. They think that they can go in as a pro. They are bigger than the audience out there. They think that they're standing and they're speaking down to you. I've actually seen some joke images from the old cross-gen times with Mark Waid, with him standing at a pulpit talking to the other people working there, and they're all bowing down, and he's of course gracing them. Now, even though that's a joke picture, it showcases what type of mentality was around there. You can imagine how people were really responding in that. And if you've never seen anything about cross-gen, I would encourage you to look it up. About the guy who basically couldn't come on their property anymore, that was given, that was not only told to stay out, he was also given a restraining order. He couldn't meet with his own team within it. He came in punching holes in walls, breaking things. Not only that, when the company finally went under, he sent them a black wreath. And he said, something about the wife there. How would she feel now? And unfortunately, the owner there, his wife had been dead for a while. So that's the kind of things that Mark Waid does. But yeah, such a decent human being, taking up for people. So Jesse Baker here, and props to Jesse Baker within this, not letting it slide, actually calls Mark Waid out. Says the man who admitted to turning a blind eye to Eddie Berganza's sexual harassment of female employees at DC because you didn't want to sell your nerd swag in a event he might sue, threatened to physically assault a YouTube reviewer at a convention because he dared to offer legitimate criticism on Marvel's garbage offerings and attacks on fans, and legit banned from stepping foot at DC Comics office because Dido and Bob here are legit afraid you might shoot up the place. And let's not forget that you threatened another publisher who was going to publish said reviewer's comic, putting himself and Marvel Disney at risk of being sued into oblivion, and had to pull a delete everything on social media because everyone and their mother saw you threatening Richard, giving him ample evidence to sue you into the poorhouse, which makes your protection of Berganza all the more sickening since you are willing to risk being sued for harming another comic maker, but not to protect women being sexually harassed or assaulted. So of course here goes Mark Waid, moderator. I know I'm fairly new here, but isn't that nonsense list of accusations and lies grounds for a ban? And of course, yeah, that gets him banned right here. We generally are reluctant, but he's been given warnings. By the way, thank you to the person who reported the post. Oh, who was the person that? Mark Waid, because Mark Waid then, after that, he has to be able to go in and he has to be able to talk about this stuff without any blowback, because he knows if people are going to ban, if these people are going to fawn over him, then he can say whatever he wants, and this narrative, they will be without opposition. So looking at what he has to say with this, to everyone else, I don't normally take time to bother with accusations. Are you working on your comedy routine? Because that's what that sounds like. But because I suspect a great number of members here are out of the loop, I feel it necessary to set the record straight rather than just let libel cruise around on its own, says the guy who admitted turning a blind eye to Eddie Berganza's sexual harassment of female employees at DC. A lie. As I said, I confronted him and his bosses repeatedly with no result. Yeah, you talked about all of this kind of stuff because you didn't want to sell your nerd swag. That isn't a direct quote and is pretty heinous twisting of what I did say. What I said at the time was that a man who wasn't directly involved with, a direct observer of a sexual harassment case, has a leg to stand on in court if they decide to make accusations, and going bankrupt defending defending yourself against slander lawsuit helps no one. There are other far more effective ways for men to support victims and help change the situation. Did you change the situation, Mark? When you had all of this stuff going on, did you actually change the situation? Because you said that you knew about it for a long time. But, while these people were speaking up about that, the people that you say are right because you knew what was going on, what did you do? Oh, you said behind the scenes I said something, but people ignored it. Okay, that's all you were willing to do? Good job there. The strong, they definitely protect the weak, don't they, Mark Waid? Continuing here. Threatened to physically assault a YouTube reviewer at a convention because he dared offer legit criticism on Marvel's garbage offerings. Another lie. A while back, when I heard that a harasser of women in comics, see below, because this is proof. He says, that's not a direct quote, but see below, here's my proof, was attending a show I was going to be at. I asked people to let me know if they saw him so I could go find him and talk to him. Admittedly, I was pissed when I wrote it, so my tone probably reflected that, but at no time was physical action suggested or even implied, only inferred by his defenders, all of whom are so very eager to play victim 24/7. Says the guy who just got someone banned, the guy who had to indeed scrub his social media, which you do not talk about. You had to scrub the entirety of it because you know that you did something very, very wrong in this kind of stuff. And yeah, if people want to go back and they want to look at what he had to say during 2017, talking about that Comic-Con, yeah, he told people, if you see him there, come and get me, even if I'm on a panel, he would come out there. And the implied thing there was a threat. That was a threat you had to go and had to spin over and over again because the optic on that was garbage. Of course, you like to say that, oh man, it's just those people playing victim. No, Mark Waid, the guy who has talked about flipping over tables, has threatened people many times in the past. That guy there, the one that says he has an anger problem, you think he's just going to have words? Not only that, we saw B. Clay Moore, him talking about goading people into violence. You saw people like Taylor Esposito talking about the one punch cry out. When you see all of this and you think about it behind the scenes, what do you think somebody like Mark Waid, who got this vindication in the past because he was allowed to take on this narrative, what do you think he would do? What would he be emboldened to do? These kind of people are dangerous within an audience. Just because they're a pro with a well-known name does not mean that they cannot be dangerous people. And Mark Waid, he sounds like a dangerous person that would destroy something whenever he got the chance. But continuing here, an attacks on fans and legit banned from stepping foot at DC office because Dan and Bob are legit afraid you might shoot up the place. Now we're in total whack job territory. Also on point for the forum, if DC hated me so much, they wouldn't be reprinting my work. Yeah, they might reprint your work there if they're going to make money on it, number one. And let's talk about CrossGen. What about all of that? If you're going to talk about how things went, what about that restraining order? What about the story from an editor that talked about how they went into office one day late? They used to always come in late, and they came in early one day instead of being late. And when they came in, they heard this awful noise. So they go in and they find Mark Waid slamming a phone up and down repeatedly, just angrily doing it. Now, when they say something about that, Mark Waid, he just kind of stops. Doesn't say anything about it, but he kind of stops. And the strangest thing within that is the other people in the office, they don't even actually react to Mark Waid because this is so normal. This person just missed this almost daily behavior. That's Mark Waid. This is a problem. This is a person with issues that is in offices. But of course, yeah, he's not a dangerous person at all. But continuing here, and let's not forget that you threatened another publisher who was going to publish said reviewer's comic, putting himself at Marvel Disney at risk of being sued into oblivion, and had to pull a delete everything on social media because everyone and their mother saw you threatening Richard, giving him ample evidence to sue you into the poorhouse. Also an outright lie. When a publishing acquaintance of mine, someone I respect, was being attacked by fans on their and his own creators for offering to reprint a Kickstarter graphic novel, I suggested that maybe they all allow Waid to burn his company to the ground until I could talk to him and make sure he knew who he was dealing with. So they needed to wait until you talked to them. Basically, it sounds like you positioned yourself in front of a mob. That's how people do when they want to go in and threaten individuals. This is how that works. I've heard some interesting stories about this too, and I really hope AP talks about this, because the longer this stuff goes on, the longer that Mark Waid is allowed to spin this narrative in a certain way, and this behavior, it'll never be culled. Also, if Antarctic sees this, if anyone does, you need to understand that this guy is ruining your name to so many people. You could go and you could at least say, hey, this guy, yeah, his tone there was definitely a threat within it, because I think people would understand that. I think people could understand exactly what transpired. And, well, what transpired here, when you're looking at it, you could see exactly how that formulated. But AP, in my opinion, made the mistake of not only pulling the book, but then on top of that saying Mark Waid, he didn't do nothing wrong. When he did, you could see that. But continuing here, by the time I called him, he'd already been through the ringer and was already inclined not to publish his exact words. Of course, we don't have his exact words, but him being through the ringer, I mean, what do you think was putting him through the ringer? Oh, the hate mob that you were involved with. Continuing, he had no idea of the background of online harassment toward women that clouded the book, and I told him, and I will take a lie detector test anywhere, anytime to prove this. Someone needs to call Mark Waid on this right here. Yeah, let's take a lie detector test. We will actually tell you what questions that we want, but we need about 40 of them set up, and we get to pick the person that gives that. I will fund that thing. I will put together an Indiegogo, and we will put your ass on a lie detector test, and we'll ask you about what you said. We'll put that together for you. So yeah, if you have the backbone to this, if you have the courage of your conviction, then yeah, I call you on this, Mark Waid. Right here, we want to put you to a lie detector test, because you say you'll take it anywhere, anytime. Your words. These are your words right here. So I'm calling you on that. We will fund it. We will put you to it. We'll even let you help decide who the person is that gives it, but you don't get to say who gives it, because, well, manipulation, we're going to take that all out of there. And of course, when people ask questions, there's no nuance. It's yes or no. So we'll let you know what questions are coming too, but you're not going to tap dance your way out of it, because there is a bold-faced lie that you've been selling. We could see it when you talked to Rich Johnston, when you talked about going in and discussing things with Antarctic. It looked terrible the way that you threw that out there. But of course, you're trying to cull that and trying to rewrite this narrative to make yourself look good, and none of it looked good. But anyhow, continuing, that I wasn't calling him to ask him not to publish, that while I thought it was a poor decision to help put money in the pocket of someone who makes dark roast YouTube videos describing women and transgender in comics, the most disgusting terms you can imagine, I would back his play no matter what decision he made. But in case it wasn't clear to him why people were upset with him, here's why. Now, when you look at this, he's saying, I would back your play, but I said, hey, let's wait until I actually talk to him to burn your company to the ground. Yeah, that's good stuff there. Not only that, I love how you talk about people being sexist, being racist, and so on. Because the dark roast actually came out months after that Comic-Con incident wherein you were just going to quote-unquote have words with somebody. Find that very interesting, Mark, how you play that out, how you try to throw that out to the crowd, saying, yeah, this is the way it went. Unfortunately, people do this strange thing. They keep the receipts. They archive posts. They actually keep up with what's transpiring. Your own words are floating around in the ether, as well as you trying to squirm out of the own narrative you created. Just like a B. Claymore within this stuff. You got caught doing something that was nasty. It showcases what that industry is. I think when we see the behind the scenes of things, like we see comic shops getting together to bully other comic shops into not carrying stuff, when we see pros behind the scenes talking about goading people into violence, or doing all of the nasty, reprehensible stuff that we've seen, the stuff that not only leaks out, with things like Shadowline Comics, an Image comic subsidiary talking about how they're going to outright gatekeep people out of jobs, but we go all the way from that to violence. Oh yeah, that really looks good on you guys. That's why people don't want to support this industry, because of this garbage and the bold-faced lies. But again, lie detector test, Mark, lie detector. But anyhow, continuing here, end of story. Believe me, if I had the power to make publish or not publish things, I would have abused it long ago. Yeah, I've seen you, go out and do quite a few nasty things in the name of Mark Waid, bullying all types of people. Here, however, these are people that have a publishing company, but they also have real lives. They have lives that you can hurt. And well, I've seen you defame people publicly, calling them sexists and racists and on. I wonder what length you would go to get something, not published. I wonder exactly what you would do within that. That's the scary thing, the implied threat within all of this. And it was bad because you scrubbed your social media, which you don't talk about in here. So continuing, which makes your protection of Berganza all the more sickening, since you're willing to be sued for harming another comic maker, but not to protect women from being sexually harassed or assaulted. That's a pretty unique point of view. Yeah, it's a very interesting point of view. What do you think about that? But continuing. In retrospect, I'm glad the accuser made these posts. Finally, a consolidated list of all the hate group talking points. Yeah, hate group, aka people who buy comic books, and they've had people like Mark Waid going out and attacking them over and over again. A lot of us have made the mistake of buying comic books from people like Mark Waid. We've seen all of this noise coming out of places like Marvel and on, and we're tired of it. We don't have to take this stuff anymore. We have power within this. People like this guy think that they can stand on a pulpit, they can preach down to you, and you have to listen. You have the power within this, not them. You have the power to walk away. Without your money, people like Mark Waid will still function, but a lot of these people, these individuals, they would at least face censure from companies once they started hurting, especially the smaller companies out there. People like Mark Waid, again, they may be able to operate with impunity, but once you start speaking, the companies that they have to answer to, they can't operate with impunity. Not for stuff like this. We've talked about tortious interference, exactly how this went across. Good videos on that, but him trying to rewrite a narrative is beyond absurd. But continuing and finishing this, please note, this post is not up for argument of any kind. Of course it's not up for argument of any kind. He basically controls a narrative, and that's that. If it somehow makes you angry, just drop me a note in my email. Now here's him, with his victim narrative. He talks about the people out here playing the victim 24/7, but here, Comicsgate doxers have spread my home address, old driver's license, old employee IDs, etc., all over the web. Yeah, that's what people were doing to you, weren't they, Mark? And of course he comes in and says, also, my thanks to the moderator and to whomever reported. Nice for us pros to know that some fans have our backs. Here, this is divisive rhetoric. The only thing that you should have out there is the ability to create comic books. You should not be making encampments out there saying you're on this side or the other side. But that's what you just did there. You're basically taking fame and you're turning it into infamy for other people. You're creating an other class. You're saying those people over there, they're not welcome. They need to be gone. And you may be able to silence people in forums like this, but you can't silence people out here everywhere. But yeah, you see stuff like this, answers. For what it's worth, Mark asked the post to be left up so that people could see what instigated this, which I suppose means blah, blah, blah. Who cares about the rest of that? But that says a lot about a forum when this is the way that things are handled. 17 posts, but hey, the guy who has created 1,200 of them, fuck it. Mark Waid comes in, he wants it removed, and that's the way that it's got to play. So anyhow, Mark Waid returns. He couldn't stay off social media very long within this stuff. And of course, when he comes back, terrible optic with it. Always terrible optic. So what do you think about this stuff? When you see Mark Waid come in and he does something like this, what do you think about all of that? What do you think about the answers within this stuff? I think it's interesting, too, that he thinks these are all the things that are out there. And I also find it interesting that all of these people now now they're, of course, going in and they're calling hate group. Just like this guy went after Gamergate, called them hate group, targeted women and on. But that's okay, you know, because the strong, they manipulate. I'm sorry, they disparage. No, how's that go? They protect the weak. That's right. And Mark Waid, he's the strong. You know, I can imagine Mark Waid sitting out there in his head. You know, he imagines himself dressed in spandex that would actually, you know, contort and be form-fitting and be flattering at the same time. Because again, this is Mark Waid. You know, he'd have his leg propped up, his spandex pants wouldn't actually rip like they would in reality. And, you know, screw it. He doesn't have a six-pack. He has an 18-pack because fuck it, I'm Mark Waid. Then he would have all of these people out there, you know, the weak. And when he made that comment about the weak, you should go and check that out, because he was talking about people of color. He was talking about homosexuals and on. He was talking about defending them because he is the strong. And you go, of course, they don't have their own voice. So I imagine he sees himself standing up there with a flowing mane of hair, because again, we're talking about his imagination. And the roar from the crowd sounds like this: "Yay, Mark Waid, you're the greatest." Because, you know, that's the kind of person he is. This is how it comes off. And it's ugly. It's really, really ugly. And it turns me off to this kind of stuff. We can either be silent and we can walk away with it too, or we can be very vocal about it. When we see it, we can stand up and we can be heard. The more of us that are heard within this kind of stuff, the harder it is for them to control the narrative. We'll never, ever go back to that being silent ever. A lot of us have stood up, and we demand that these people be held accountable for the things that they do out there. Anyhow, like I say, tell me what you think. Thank you.